Today, I will introduce a very important concept in sociology, which is socialization. I will explain how humans develop. Another objective is to introduce the various socializing agents and then explain the life course. Socialization, then, is the process of imparting knowledge to the next generation of humans. This is a process that happens throughout our life. It begins the moment we are born and it ends the moment we pass. And so this is the process of becoming human, what we think is human. And so it develops our personalities. And so this is how people are taught to be able to interact according to the cultural belief systems of that society. Some theories on socialization start from the psychology side, and then we will end with purely sociological points of view. So Sigmund Freud believed that the mind tend to influence human behavior. According to psychologists, human behavior may be the result of chemical balances in the brain. It has to do with genetics, and so the focus is internal. Jean Piaget was also a psychologist who actually believed that biology also had an influence in how people developed, as well as social experiences. So, here is the idea of what's called social psychology, where you understand the behaviors that are influenced through chemical reactions or genetics, but also how society and the environment plays an important role in the development. Charles Horton Cooley said that we actually tend to see ourselves as others may imagine us. So, for example, we other people are a mirror to us, and we act according to what those people are reflecting back at us. And so, this is the first sociologist that I'm introducing, and the rest of the theorists will be sociologists. George Herbert Mead basically believe that social experiences are what develop the self. So the environment, the social interactions, the way how we grew up, our family environment, our community, television, all of that tends to be part of the environment. It tends to influence how we develop ourselves. Carol Gilligan actually talked about morality. She wanted to understand how morality is viewed between females and males. And this has a lot to do with how people are socialized to think as females or think as males. Females tend to think about care and responsibility. Basically, they are looking at the reasons behind their behavior before they bring judgment upon it. Whereas males tend to emphasize the justice perspective, which tends to emphasize the rules and the laws. Now, although these behaviors tend to be attributed to males and females, it doesn't necessarily mean that all females fall in these categories. You have the exception to the rules. You also have cultures that may be more inclined to have a mix, and but here generally Carol Gilligan found these patterns for our culture. And so we come to a debate that has been going on for a long time, where you have the debate of deciding or trying to decide what makes humans. Is it biology or is it the environment? So when you talk about nurture, it's more on the sociological point of view where behavior is a result of learning in the environment. When you talk about nature, it's based on behavior being the results of genetics. I believe that the reality falls somewhere in between, where social psychology may be more of where the answers lie. However, we are in a sociology class. So we come to the agents that socialize the next generation of human beings. Family is the greatest influencer of attitudes and behaviors in children. And they are the greatest influencers because they have access to us when we are babies. And so the social position tends to shape the ethic or the work ethic of individuals. And in our society, it really does have an impact where you are born. So if I am born in a working class environment, in a working class family, I will likely be taught to be obedient because people that experience poverty, the way they survive is through actually exhibiting obedience in a society. If I am middle class or wealthy class, what's called high income class, my family may encourage me to be creative, to be comfortable with questioning authority in ways that are comfortable to everyone involved. And so creativity and questioning authority may be some of the values that are taught to middle class and upper class individuals. Gender is also a very important role that the children are taught by family. This is where, for the first time, children may be told that girls wear pink and boys wear blue, where girls are told that their physical appearance may be important, where boys maybe are taught that being active and proactive and assertive are important. Family also promotes religious beliefs. If I come from a family that is atheist, that doesn't believe in a deity, the likelihood is that I will be the same. If I come from a family that is very devout in religion, I will likely be a believe in religion as well. The next agent that socializes us is school. This is where children go from being maybe the center of their small family to now going into an environment where they're one of many other children. So it's the first time where they experience in personal evaluations of themselves, where they are one of many children, so they are taught the knowledge that will help them for later years by professional individuals. And so schools then are these areas where hopefully children tend to be exposed to a diverse environment. Unfortunately, some of the patterns that exist is that it actually, schools can be grounds for reinforcing ideas that can be harmful. It can be grounds for enforcing ideas of class. So, for example, if I went to a public school, it probably means that I am middle class or maybe even a working class individual, and I will likely not meet billionaire children in my school district because the structure is set as such to where very wealthy people create their own schools or they go to their own schools. And so schools can actually reinforce a lot of these divisions. The next group that socializes us is peer groups. Peer groups are people that are very important to us. And I had mentioned that one of the cultural universals is um, having a sense of family. So having a sense of belonging is an important skill for survival. And so when a person gets into adolescence, which is a period when a person is not a child but they're not an adult, their the peers may have a lot more influence, and this can be very challenging for parents when their children are exposed to ideas that are maybe very different from what they understand. And it can also be a place where there may be a very information that is not correct, that is being spread around. So for example, here when adolescents are learning about sexual behavior, They may be learning all the information from other peers, and they may be getting the wrong information. And so this becomes a challenging time for adults, for the parents of those adolescents. The last agent that socializes us is mass media. And mass media can include watching video games, social media, television. People, according to our textbook, people tend to watch about 4 hours of television daily. And the problems with this is that it can reinforce stereotypes. For example, video games generally tend to have males, and they tend to, and also expose us to a great deal of violence, as well as television tends to reinforce uh, gender roles, and they tend to reinforce racial and ethnic roles. And what the challenge is that when people are exposed to a great deal of violence, you're going to see in other chapters where it actually tends to impact the brain. And it doesn't mean that a child will necessarily be violent when they play a video game. However, it means that their tolerance for violence may actually get higher and higher. Now we come to the life course. The life course is basically points in our life where we transition from one definition of what it means to be human to the next. Childhood is defined by culture. In our culture, we have what's called a high income nation, so we're able to prolong the definition of childhood. Some of us may say childhood that is at 10, when people are 10 years old, or maybe even longer. In other cultures that are called low income nations, you have individuals who are 4 or 6 years old and they're already working full time. And so culture plays an important role in how we define these. Adolescence is a period where a person is not a child, but they're not yet an adult. The person is maybe trying to get away from parental supervision, but they can't uh, protect themselves economically, or they don't have the economic resources to be able to be independent. Adulthood then is where most accomplishments tend to take place, but that is also culturally related. In our culture, when you're 18, you're considered an adult. However, you're not allowed to drink. You can drink when you're 21. And so culture then plays an important role in say, well, what is adulthood? In other cultures, you have individuals who are 10 years old and they're already working 12-hour days. And so culture then tells us helps us to understand where we are in this life cycle. Finally, we come to old age, which is defined by culture and biology. We understand that as people age, there are physical changes that occur. However, culture plays a major role in how the elderly will see their life, the end of their life. So, for example, in low income nations, the elderly are highly respected. They're seen as people who bring knowledge and who bring wealth to a relationship. Their life experiences are extremely valued. In our culture, we live in a high income nation. The elderly might be seen as obsolete. Taking care of the elderly is not necessarily an honor, but maybe a burden. And the elderly are seen as falling behind in technology and lagging behind. And so the experience of old age then is also influenced by culture. Death and dying then is the acceptance of human life coming to an end. And it's plants experience the same thing and other types of animals. The concern in our culture is that because we are a youth oriented society, we tend to value being young. We see death and dying as something that needs to be conquered. We see death and dying as an enemy instead of something that's part of our life. And it is particularly uh, telling how our culture views death and dying when death occurs to someone that's young. We normally accept, even though it may hurt us, We accept that our grandparents will die, and we may say they lived a long life, but then becomes something of an offensive act if someone that's young dies. And so that has to do with our cultural belief system as well.